Roxanne has more than 25 years experience in journalism and public relations. She is a graduate of Drake University and began her journalism career at the Des Moines Register and Tribune. At the Tribune, she was part of a team that won a first place Iowa Associated Press Managing Editors Award for historical series on Blacks in Iowa. Evans covered Austin's ISD's struggles with desegregation as a reporter at the Austin American-Statesman and is a charter member of the National Museum of African American Culture and History at the Smithsonian. A research paper she wrote on Black Catholics in Texas was presented before the Texas State Historical Association and is in the archives of the Schomburg Center in New York. Evans is a member of the Travis County African American Heritage Council, serves on the Advocacy Committee for Preservation Austin, and serves on the board of the Austin History Center Association. Please help me welcome Roxanne Evans.
Thank you for that introduction, Laretha. And I'd also like to thank our previous speaker, Stacy, for infusing the space with so much positive, creative energy. So thank you. Can you see my screen? Okay, perfect. And I'm going to add a little bit of background before I get started. As Laretha touched on, a lot of my professional life as well as my personal life has been steeped in public education. As a reporter covering AISD, and then as a parent of 4, I've spent a lot of time in spaces related to public education. So I'm here today to talk about public education in Austin's Freedmen colonies. Education is a key component of this year's theme, the Black family, representation, identity, and diversity. There are strong parallels between the struggles of 2020 and those of early freedmen colonies, as African Americans found themselves trying to survive during the recent pandemic and the intensifying police violence, racial violence. The family and the community have yet again provided support and sustenance, as it did then, as it does now, as it has always done. And it was our pioneering ancestral families that created our earliest educational structures as one way to survive the forces that sought to destroy us, and to also equip our children with the tools needed to not only survive, but to be successful in this country. What I seek to convey today is that the importance of education was an aspirational value embedded in the African American community during slavery, and was brought to life in the earliest days after slavery. Let me briefly provide the context for freedmen communities that aided my research by giving respect to 2 experts on the communities, experts who I'm honored and humbled to share this space with today. Andrea Roberts of Texas A&M University, a historian and expert on freedmen or freedmen colonies, as you're all familiar with, I'm sure, has discovered that as many as 180,000 formerly enslaved people established more than 550 freedom colonies, settlements or towns founded by independent Black Texans between 1865 and 1930, excuse me. Travis County alone had at least a dozen of these freedmen communities. To fully understand these settlements and how they survived, and in some cases thrived, more essential reading is from archivist Michelle Mears' 2009 book, And Grace Will Lead Me Home, African American Freedmen Communities of Austin, 1865 to 1928. Following emancipation, more than a dozen freedmen colonies began springing up in Travis County. Among them were, bear with me one moment, Among them were Wheatville, Robertson Hill, Kinchinville, Red River, Clarksville, Masontown, Gregorytown, Barton Springs, Pleasant Hill, Burditt's Prairie, Raina Branch, and Bolden Plantation. Most of these communities were formed between 1864 and 1895. It is important to note that these communities were throughout all parts of Travis County, all parts of Austin, north, south, east, and west. And I will explain the significance of this a little later on. A common element of these communities is that most of them had school buildings or, at minimum, held schools in homes or churches. I repeat, education was very important to these early settlements. And now a little bit more about just a few of these communities. And I have some more images to share. And some of these images are the historical markers at the locations of some of these sites. I think you see now why I was a print journalist, not a television journalist. Just a second. There we go. Barton Springs, south of the famous springs. This community was founded and settled by former enslaved people in 1865. School was held at Barton Springs Baptist Church, established in 1879. It's more than a bit ironic that Blacks would be barred from these same springs, one of Austin's biggest tourist attractions, years later. A historic marker, as you can see here, notes the church, which still stands today. Wheatville, located in 1869 near the current University of Texas campus, this community worshiped at New Hope Baptist Church and studied at Wheatville School, which you will see shortly, founded in 1881. Robertson Hill, where this school was located, was considered by some to be the earliest center of Black life and culture in central East Austin. At the time it was founded in 1869. Robertson Hill has been home to Ebenezer Baptist Church and Robertson Hill School, among other institutions. Ebenezer and many other early institutions, primarily churches, remain in East Austin today. Here we have a marker noting the old Anderson High School, also in the Robertson Hill area. And here is a school, Brackenridge Elementary, which was in South Austin. As you can see, a very large class, a very serious looking student body. Students, teachers, and the community took education very seriously. Here we have Wheatville School. Wheatville, which I mentioned, is near the University of Texas campus, and there are remnants of the Wheatville community today. Unfortunately, only remnants, thanks to a number of forces that have been much more active than the preservation community. Here we have a photo of Granville Webster Norman. Granville Norman on the left with his teachers at Gregorytown Elementary School in Austin. As you can see, the teachers are all dressed in their Sunday best. Again, a testament to how serious they took their profession and the work in educating our children. Granville Norman has a school named for him in East Austin. Clarksville is one additional community. Governor Elijah Pease granted lots from the West Austin plantation to formerly enslaved persons. Charles Griffin Clark brought additional land and organized the community of Clarksville in 1871. The Clarksville School had its home in this 11-block community that at one time boasted as many as 90 homes. Although little can be found about the curriculum taught in these early schools, it's safe to surmise that the basic 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic, were regularly taught. Records of early African American high schools, however, show that other subjects taught included deportment, manners and etiquette, declamation or speech and public speaking, sewing, home economics, and agriculture. It's quite likely that students might have been introduced to some of these subject areas in primary or elementary school. Because a college for African Americans, Samuel Houston College, was founded in 1876, and Tillotson College was founded a year later, it's likely that some of these early freedmen schools had some college-educated teachers. Most schools in the early years ran from January through May, so the children could help out in their family fields. But there were others where children were in school nearly all year, very similar to the current school year of 9 months. Once again, a testament to the value of education to these early families. There is also evidence of the importance of education in these communities because of the testimony from Black delegates to the Texas Constitution Conventions of 1868, 1869, and 1875, and to the legislature of the Reconstruction. In 1868, for the first time, African Americans were elected to the Constitutional Convention. That year, 10 African American men were seated, and education was an issue pushed and advocated for by these African American legislators, most of whom were but just a few years past slavery themselves. Let me read from a section of one of these early state constitutions. The legislature, that would be the Texas legislature, may provide for the levying of a tax for educational purposes, provided the taxes levied shall be distributed from year to year, as the same may be collected, and provided that all the sums arising from said tax, which may be collected from Africans or persons of African descent, shall be exclusively appropriated for the maintenance of a system of public schools for Africans and their children. And it shall be the duty of the legislature, to encourage schools among these people. So, this Texas Constitution allowed for schools for these people, but it guaranteed that the schools would be underfunded since they had to be financed by the communities they would benefit. These African American freedmen communities, these Austin communities, with their schools, not only survived post Reconstruction, but thrived and prospered for years. That would change dramatically in 1928. In 1928, as you see on this slide, a city plan for Austin was commissioned by the city. This plan called for the mass relocation, displacement, and segregation of Blacks into the newly created Negro District in East Austin. The plan, instead of focusing on the dislocation, focused on the so-called amenities to Blacks once they agreed to resettlement. These amenities included utilities, paved roads, a neighborhood park, sewers, and trash collection. What the 1928 plan meant for the freedom colonies in Austin, basically the colonies no longer existed. Black freedom was restricted. Freedmen-owned property was lost, or more likely, stolen. Schools and businesses were closed. History was erased. During both the time Travis County later managed the all-black schools, or the Austin Independent School District managed the schools. One thing was certain: the schools were understaffed, under-resourced, and had to make do with what little they had and could get on their own. In other words, it was something like the days of the Freedmen colonies, but without the autonomy. Fast forward to Brown v. Board. Despite the historic 1954 U.S. Supreme Court decision, the state of Texas in general, and AISD in particular, were not eager to desegregate schools. After various and sundry desegregation plans that ranged from integrating sixth graders only to integrating staff, one-way busing of black students, to two-way busing of all students, Austin was a mishmash of desegregation plans, many of which were legally questionable. In 1987, after more than 30 years of litigating Brown v. Board, Austin was declared unitary. This meant they were finally abiding by the 1954 Supreme Court decision, but barely. And let me share those dates one more time. 1987, AISD was declared in compliance with the 1954 U.S. Supreme Court decision. And this image I have here before you is of the last all-black high school in Austin, Anderson High School, which was closed in 1971. That same year, 1987, after Austin was declared in compliance with Brown v. Board, it ended crosstown busing for desegregation purposes. This past Saturday, the school, the image to your left, received a state historical marker as the last and only all-black high school in Austin, the original L.C. Anderson. Education for students in AISD is still a tale of two cities. White schools in the western part of the city are more likely to be wealthy and high-performing, well-resourced schools. In the eastern part of the city, the schools are predominantly home to students of color, many of whom come from disadvantaged families. The campuses are often considered low-performing, and facilities are under-resourced. The quality of education for Black students in Austin, 150 years post-emancipation, still very much remains a work in progress. I reached this conclusion based on personal experience and based on data on how African American students in Austin are overrepresented in disciplinary actions and special education, and underrepresented in areas such as talented and gifted programs, and in the coveted seats in the district's magnet and specialty programs. I had hoped my research on these schools would lead me to conclude that African American students in Austin and AISD are significantly better off today than the years following emancipation. But things are inconclusive as far as I'm concerned. The jury is still out on this issue. Certainly, facilities are better, certified teachers are required, but there are some other issues that remain. Although there's some evidence to support my feeling that the jury is still out on this, I don't have to look much farther than the fact that zero fourth graders at Blackshear Elementary School in East Austin passed the math portion of the state-mandated STAR exam in the most recently reported results from TEA. This is tragic. For many families in Austin seeking to regain control of their children's education, it's no surprise that African American families in Austin are looking at homeschooling, private schools, charter schools, and they're even discussing the possibility of creating a separate East Austin school district as a way to retain their children, to reclaim their children's education. Perhaps some of these decisions by African American families are a nod to the freedom and autonomy they had educating their children during the days of the freedmen colonies. In some ways, public education seems to be similar to voting rights. If it isn't so important, why do they keep trying to take it away from us? That includes my remarks. Thank you. And thank you, Laretha, for the invite today.
Thank you, Sharon. I really like the way you brought everything together with regard to how the 1928 um, ordinance kind of piggybacked on the way it affected the schools and everything, and really appreciate the research that you did in order to put that presentation together. Really appreciate it.